Welcome to the first installment of the Spy webinar series. My co-host Michael and myself, Paul. Many of you may know of Spy already if you've signed up for our email list here, but if not, Spy is an AV company. We've been around for about 20 years. Founded the company in my garage.
My name is Michael Thornton. I'm a designer and installer here at Spy, and I help design the Clam.
So today we're just going to go through some of the key features of the Clam. I'll ask some questions that a lot of people ask us so that the audience doesn't have to ask it. But if you do have any questions, just chime in on the chat and we will answer them as soon as we can. So Mike, the basis of the Clam is essentially to be able to cleanly mount some of our devices that typically are involved in a commercial setting behind the monitor versus in a credenza below. Can you give me a little overview of kind of how that design came to be?
Yeah, so exactly. So our installers are complaining in the field and they're coming to me saying, hey, we need to find a new way to hang a display and also protect our devices, keep them organized, clean, also make them more accessible. And so we all got together as a team. We started drawing this plan up. And then after some iterations, we went ahead and started designing in CAD. And we brought it into SolidWorks. We modeled it, we tested it, and then we basically had prototypes made to create a two-part system that's like a hinge, like a door hinge that opens with a pivot point that allows you to hang a display on it. And as simple as one installer showing up and swinging the door open with a safety cable that will stop at a certain point. That way they can access the gear, check the gear, test the gear, and pre-install in some cases. So that's kind of the gist of it.
So what we've got here is both parts. So talk to me a little bit about how stuff is mounted, airflow, how it's mounted to the wall.
Let's start with the wall part. This is the wall part in front of us right here. So in this case, what's interesting about it is you don't, you can just, use the Clam itself to put the gear in. And what you can do is you can see there's these metal tabs right here. And simply by taking a plier, you can grab one of these and bend these into a shelf. So you can imagine if this is on the wall, now you can go ahead and you can take your gear and you can stack that gear on these little shelves and then zip tie them somehow. And then you can also add interconnects and get all your devices together so they're clean and they're neat. You can run your short cables. You can zip tie under the metal parts. We have zip tie hole locations all the way around. So this would be mounted to the wall, of course, in a vertical position. Now, if you didn't want to do this, we also have the option for what we call the Clam pan, and that's right here, also known as the pearl pan.
We can't know that this is bent though.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just bend this down. So the pearl pan was meant to be pre-deviced. So what's nice about this is if we have, let's say 10, 15, 20 rooms, they're all the same with all the same devices, with all the same displays. Well, they could have different displays as well. We can get all this gear in-house. We can load all the gear onto the pan. Most of these have bolting patterns onto the back, so we can bolt them into the pan. And then we can use the shortest cables that we possibly need for all these devices to be hooked up and connected to each other. Then we can have one of our techs. Actually, this is a perfect example right here that's being shown. We can have one of our techs do all our testing, making sure everything is working fine. And then these get preloaded into one of our travel cases and brought to the job site. What's nice about it is when you get to a job site, you don't have all this cardboard, you don't have this plastic, you don't have to go up and down the freight elevator, you don't have to worry about getting it to the garbage can. We pretty much pre-do all that. And the best part about it is we know it's ready to go and it's tested. So it's a big time saver, but it's not necessary. You can just use the Clam alone on itself. This is like an addition to the Clam.
So this would allow for, if you have 15 rooms that are exactly the same, you pre-do it with the techs in the office, test all the equipment to make sure it's not dead on arrival, use the shortest cables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and cables are expensive. If you can shorten them, it makes a big difference.
And then talk to me about these perfs here.
Yeah, that's
some of the holes that we've got.
That's a really good question. So we have a regular Spy Clam, and the Spy Clam is what you see right here. We also have a Clam XL, which is bigger. It's for larger displays from 70 up until 90. but the clam here is for 46 to up to about 70. So in this case, the clam pan has these perf locations like you were saying, and an installer might only need one panel. So they can come in with their tin snips, give it a couple snips, bend it back and forth, snap it. Now they have a short piece that they can preload, pre-configure, and zip tie into the top.
So we've got this cutout here is for airflow, and we've got some ways to get the equipment that's in there to be happy versus sitting in a credenza where it's going to be no airflow and extra cable length.
Yep. Yeah, that will keep your devices really happy having that airflow. This big opening here obviously is power data locations, and you have a lot of bandwidth here to find those locations. Yeah, and that's a good example right there where Paul's opening up the door. You can see now there's nothing loaded in this shot here, but we have images which you can see how they're fully loaded.
So we have this entire open space to put your power and your data. So based on stud locations and where the electricians and the low voltage guys can run stuff.
Yep.
You can adjust this mount back and forth.
That's right.
And then the TV doesn't necessarily have to be centered on this device.
That's right.
But there are some guidelines that you guys use.
Yeah. So basically what we do is we decide what side we're going to pivot on. So in this case, it would be on the right side. And then the display edge is usually about 5 inches off the face of the mount. And that's how we mount. When you're doing your installation, most of our jobs are all commercial. They're all metal studs. So the guys go in the field, they locate all their metal studs. Sometimes they're 16 on center, sometimes they're 24 on center. We want to make sure we try to get 4 togglers or 3 togglers at the top, 3 togglers at the bottom. And we always hit our studs. We always ask for plywood too. In the case that we can't reach a stud at the very pivot, we always have plywood there that we anchor that corner part, because this location right here is receiving most of the force when you swing your display open. So this is an important region, and we always make sure that that area is very well connected.
You talked a little bit about the opening. So in terms of safety and how that works, we do have some sort of mechanism that keeps it from opening too far.
Yep. Yeah, we have this little safety cable. This little safety cable is installed on site. When you show up, you go ahead and you can do all your devicing and everything with only one mount mounted to the wall. And then when it's ready to install the display, you lift the display up with the other part applied to the display. And then this safety cable goes in the hole and then has basically a screw that fastens down in a pre-made hole for it. That way it only can open 15 degrees. Which is still enough that an installer can easily go inside and make changes or fix things or check data ports.
So I think one of the key features of this mount is obviously it's still a 2-person install just due to the weight of the TV and the size. It's a great video of us testing the different weights that it'll hold. That was where the sheetrock failed before the mount.
Yeah, that's... And that's fully perpendicular to the wall. So this is a good load test.
And it would never be this far out. We just wanted to test worst case scenario.
Yeah. This is a prototype.
And I think this is the one where we actually put it into the studs of the wall. So now this is the one where the mount fails before the wall.
Yeah.
And the mount, when it fails, it just kind of bends itself off the wall. So that's every weight we had in the building, which is going to be way more than any monitor that you're going to see in the field. And we created an earthquake as well, because it wasn't failing without an earthquake. So I think we get it to go here.
Oh, there it starts to collapse.
There we go. And that was probably version 7, and I believe we're on version 49.
Yeah, we're on version 49. And that's a good point. So what happens is we all go out in the field as installers. We install these units, and then the guys take notes, and they start to realize they come back and they're like, hey, Michael, can we change the pivot point? Can we add bendable shelves? Can we add set screws for leveling? Can we do this? Can we do that? And what we do is we'll change our drawing formats and our CAD, and then we go ahead and run tests, and we test it and improve it each time. So it just gets better and better and better. So
yeah, and I think a good point about this, made in the USA. The Clam XL is about $350 retail. The standard Clam is about $250. It's a slight premium over the mounts that are out in the market now, but the cost savings of the length or the life of this product on your wall and the service, where one person can go out and service a mount versus two, is a pretty key feature. So we think it's a pretty cool product. Mike, maybe talk a little bit about what's next.
So we're working on version 3. In version 3, basically the major upgrade in that is that the typical mount that we're dealing with, especially 46 up to the 90-inch displays, they typically have a 400 millimeter by 400 millimeter VESA pattern, and that's the mounting location on the back of a display. But occasionally we still have displays that have 300 millimeter vertical rise. So that forces us to put an adapter bracket using the Clam. And what we want to do is we want to make sure we have a 400 millimeter vertical, and we want a 300 millimeter vertical for those smaller displays that have a VESA pattern of 300 by 300. So we're going to add that, test that. We're also going to go ahead and we're going to increase the interior enclosure space. So when the devices are in there, we want to be able to encapsulate a 1.75 inch 1U device. And yeah, that would be our maximum thickness that we're going for. I know our techs have asked for that, so we're going to go ahead and run with that. And we're going to test that as well. We're also going to try to lighten the larger XL. Right now, it is pretty beefy, and it has to be pretty beefy because it's handling these large 90-inch displays. So we want to work on some new configurations with the steel.
So to keep it short and sweet, that's our webinar on the Clam. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us at Spye or hit us up on the chat here quick. If not, can these be installed left and right swing? Good question.
Excellent question. Yep. The mounts they're basically mirrored on both sides. So you can take the hardware. If you decide you don't want to do a right pivot, you can shift to your left side and insert your hardware. We have a skewer rod that goes through that creates the hinge point. But yep, that's a great question. And a lot of times we'll do that, just because of ease of access. In some cases, a display could be pushed up against a wall, or maybe there's some cabinetry. And so we prefer the pivot be put to the opposite side so an installer can get in and have better access.
And when we do dual monitors, another question came up, we typically do the swing with an opening in the middle for interconnection of all the different devices that may have to go between the two monitors.
That's right.
You can do it, Michael said, either way, but we typically do it with the door swinging into the open in the middle. Any other questions?
Yeah, something else to bring up about the dual monitors is that's usually done in a large boardroom, and there's a lot of devices, and we've actually been able to not have a full rack, and we're able to install all the devices back behind the two displays with them interconnecting, and that's why it's so important to have them swing and pivot at the very outsides of both monitors.
And that's a good point, because in a commercial installation, there's usually an AV budget, there's a furniture budget, there's all this labor. You put something like this in that removes the credenza, and you're eliminating a piece of furniture, you're eliminating passing cable through the wall to get to the credenza, you're increasing the life of the products that are behind it because of the airflow. They're not sitting in the credenza getting hot. So there might be a small increase in the price of the mount.
There's savings
spend on EV, but a huge benefit over time.
The electrical contractor doesn't have to run conduit sometimes, depending on the configuration.
Yeah, so there can be big savings with just kind of thinking through these rooms. And now as people are going to more Zoom rooms and more huddle rooms and smaller rooms where they can just be like self-contained, they don't have to run back to a main server. This is a pretty key product. Someone just asked, can anyone install these? Typically we install them. Yes, someone could install them that has not done it before. I've done it. And I would not consider myself to be in the field as of late. But yeah, it's like any other kind of mechanical product that as long as you follow directions and know what you're doing, it can be installed.
Yeah, we prefer them to be installed by a licensed installer, AV integrator. Folks that install displays on a regular basis that understand how to hit studs, how to penetrate the metal studs and put togglers in. Because safety is pretty key here, and you never want a display to come off the wall or someone not to put, the safety cable in place. That's really important. So
Can a conferencing camera speaker bar be incorporated?
absolutely, no problem. And it makes it easier for the installation as well, as far as getting to your cabling and stuff.
So would you just mount it to the top of the swinging piece so it's attached to the monitor basically, or below or above, depending on where?
Yep, you can do it that way as well. We still use some of the VESA holes in the display. The hardware still fits. So you might have to change your metric hardware sometimes. You might need a little bit slightly longer. But even large speaker bars that we do, like custom Leon bars and stuff like that, that mount directly to the wall. And they obviously have cables that have to travel between. But yep, it's not a problem.
Any other questions? Are these mass produced? What's the typical lead time for a large order? Yes, they are mass produced. They're built here in the United States. I would say typical lead time is 6 weeks.
Yep, about 6 weeks for large order for production.
Can they be customized? In a large order, they could potentially be customized for color, but I would say that's probably it. It's kind of a design that over the course of time has just been optimized for what it is. And so, sorry, Carl. All right, I think that's it for our first webinar. I'd say 7 out of 10, 8.5.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining.